I keep trying to move my
Yeah,
camera
it's a
so
locked
that
camera, so it's not going to let you. Although I do move your mouse once in
yeah,
a while, because my last two interviewees both disconnected,
yeah,
which was quite funny.
I keep trying to move the
Yeah,
camera.
it's okay, I'll move it for you. So,
Ooh, wait. I had my stream
audio
like
wants to echo,
this
yeah.
now. Yeah.
Well, so this is the third of the interviews of the Attorney General candidates, and there will probably not be any more voiced ones. Probably. And here we have AwesomeJSyndicate, who is known for absolutely nothing currently. But, you know, he's DOJ, so I guess he's got qualifications. But I'm sure he'll like to speak about that himself. So if there's anything opening to say, now is the time.
Well, my campaign has been described by some as very confrontational, but quite honestly, I'm a confrontational guy. I know that sounds bad, but it's not as bad as it seems. And really, I serving as the deputy attorney general, I've got the experience. I've done the work. I've essentially been the attorney general for the past, since I've been hired, which I believe was late November. And I've been doing work. I've been assisting as much as I can, and quite honestly, I'm just trying to look for your vote. But I digress.
Well, to begin with, why are you running against your current boss?
Me and Adam have been friends ever since, probably even before I got hired, starting since I first met him. And we decided that it was a losing chance to put our resources in Adam, which is why he's not really posting much or had a real campaign. We just decided his popularity is just too low to have an actual campaign. So we decided it's best to put resources in my campaign and to have someone from this leadership continue on and better the administration. So we decided to, put resources in me and run.
Fair enough. Well, as you seem to be so supportive of him, what do you think of the recall petition against him, and specifically all the allegations against him from the original document?
Whenever the recall passed, I wrote a document, and I don't believe he was recalled because of the articles or the allegations. I believe he was just recalled simply because he's similar to me, a confrontational man. He's someone that people don't really like, and I don't think the recall was like a guilty verdict on the allegations. It was more of a, we don't like your popularity, your attitude, so we're gonna
Well, you
recall.
could just as easily argue by that logic the recall's a good thing for him, because if not for the recall, the Senate would have tried to impeach him by now.
Fair. And yeah, I believe the people have a right to vote. They voiced their opinion, and we heard it. And he is
But
now
it's worth
recalled.
noting 350 votes is a lot. There have been some very riled up people about other matters before, and it's still, no, I've never actually got that high on a recall petition.
And that's fair too. Their opinions have been heard, and the system of recall was made for this reason. 350 people have said that they don't appreciate what he's done, so they remove him from office. The system was created this way for a
Yeah,
reason. And I believe that that reason's been fulfilled.
fair enough. Well, most of the other candidates have campaigns focused around changing how DOJ currently works, increasing transparency, and so on. But given you currently work in DOJ, do you currently intend on massive policy changes?
There have been some issues that I've brought up against Adam, some that he believed he took the best course of action. I believe I could have took a better course of action. It's just two different opinions, and some issues we just didn't agree on. But with me in administration, serving as the attorney general, I promise to bring my ideas forth. And some of these ideas have been brought up on the allegations against Adam. For example, whenever Adam wanted to hire all the state attorneys from the institute, I advised extremely against that. When he brought the idea, I said we need to allocate those people to the public defender's firm because we have no public defenders, and if we bring them all to the department, it's just going to create such a stagnation in the justice system, and that's what we're facing
Yeah,
today.
it's just like I've heard complaints from state prosecutors that lots of their cases have not gone forward because there is no one to defend the people against them. So surely actively attempting to hire every single attorney is only detrimental rather than actually helping.
Yes, and I brought that idea forward. I was the one that advised against it, and as shown, my opinion was considered, but did not roll forward.
Fair enough. What do you think of specifically the allegations that Adam has been trying to manipulate people into changing the outcome of the election? And equally, what do you think of his attempts to challenge the election in the courts?
I don't believe he's been trying to change the election. I think he's just embraced it. I haven't seen any allegations or any proof or anything. This is the first I've heard of it.
I've only seen some allegations, but not any been particularly backed up. Although the courts bit of thing is definitely interesting.
Yes, well, the courts, what he filed in the Supreme Court was just him. I also advised against that because I said it was a petition just waiting for trouble and it was not worth it.
To be fair, you could argue the grounds for the petition are perfectly reasonable, but equally, it's not something that was ever going to pass.
Yes, and I thought it wasn't in the benefit of Adam to get the petition out because the petition would solely halt the recall, like we would say like the result of the recall. It would not halt the voting. You can't halt the like emoji system of Discord.
Yeah.
The votes would continue rolling in. And it would just not be in his benefit. So I advised against it. Similarly, was considered but did not roll forward.
So lots of your campaigning has been focused on, rather than stating your own qualifications, not necessarily insulting the other people's qualifications, but stating their lack of experience and so on. Wouldn't you say that, for example, Trip Nixon has a significant amount of legal experience and political experience within the state, and also some of the other candidates have similar experience? So why would you say they have no experience?
Me and Trip Nixon are actually working together per se in this election. We've both agreed that we have similar policies, similar ideas, and just great ideologies together. And we decided if either of us win, we should keep each other in the leadership and just assist each other as best as we could. That's why whenever I announced that I was running, I was putting Trip in as my deputy in case I do win.
Yeah.
And I don't have any issues with Trip. In fact, I would want to endorse Trip, but that would also seem like a white flag from my election campaign.
Yeah.
So that's the only reason I do not endorse him.
We do definitely have quite a history of elections where people run specifically with the intention of dropping out and endorsing someone else.
Yeah. But and in regards to the others, for example, Sam. Sam is a friend of mine. However, I did not appreciate the fact that he remained inactive Mayflower-wise for a good bit of time. And then suddenly, as soon as this election rolls out, he jumped on the bandwagon and announced that he was not inactive and that he had experience, which I believe he did not. He has never served a day in the Mayflower Department of Justice, to my knowledge. I may be wrong on that, but to my knowledge, I don't believe he served a day in the DOJ. I don't think anyone who hasn't served a day in the DOJ should lead it. They have no idea of the offices, the organization, how we do things. You can't just take your knowledge from like the United States Department of Justice and take it into the Mayflower Department of Justice. They're two different entities. They need to be kept that way. We have two different structures, two different ways of doing things. I personally have been on the ground floor of those items. I've seen how the Department of Justice runs. Therefore, I believe I'm a good candidate. And Tripp has also been on the ground floor. He was the Assistant Attorney General of the Ethics Division. He's a good candidate. And as I said, I would endorse him if it wouldn't look like a white flag from my campaign.
Well, speaking of endorsements, given your relatively close relationship with the current governor, don't you think it's interesting that he has publicly endorsed Trip Nixon multiple times and not publicly said anything in your favour?
I mean, I do have multiple endorsements. I've just not put them on the like Discord campaign channel solely because they just take up space, and I just don't like the idea of flashing around names and furthering the idea that Mayflower elections are just popularity contests, which they, in a way, sort of are.
I mean, all elections are popularity contests. It's just how it is.
Well, true, but I want it to be based on what is actually brought on the table, not a list of names of high-ranking officials in the state.
Yeah.
And I do believe Frank could endorse me right now if I really asked him to. But the only reason he hasn't is just because I haven't asked.
Fair enough. It's probably for the best, as people generally get quite annoyed when they get repetitively asked for endorsements.
Yeah.
Well, moving on, what do you think of our state's current lack of public defenders?
Oh, that is a huge issue. As I stated before, I advised against the mass hiring of newly certified individuals as like state prosecutors, because we need to divert them to the public defender because they're so low. To this time, I think we have 4 or 5
somewhere around there, yeah.
compared to the Department of Justice's like 12 state prosecutors and more if we really wanted to. But in the petition against Adam, it was bought that the Department of Justice holds a sort of monopoly on attorneys in the state, which I don't believe that's true, but I do believe that the Department of Justice is sort of misleading attorneys in the wrong direction that would eventually lead to a monopoly. But do I think that we have a monopoly right now? No.
Well, the current statistics from the state bar is, I think it's 86% of active attorneys are working within DOJ, active being the key word. Obviously, we've got loads of attorneys who don't actually practice law within the state. But of the active ones, 86% is definitely a lot.
Well, of all attorneys, the entire attorney makeup, I believe the statistic...
it would be much lower. It would be close to 10%, 20%.
Yes. And it was around that, I believe. 10, 12%, somewhere around there. But I don't believe that constitutes a monopoly yet. Now, and for example, we have, to my knowledge, at this time, 12 state prosecutors. 12 compared to 3 is not much. The real issue that the Department of Justice has is just the amount of legal staffers that we have. Granted that in real life, there is a lot of legal staffers, but this is a Roblox game, and we do not need that much legal staffers. There are legal staffers for each state attorney, 2 for each state attorney, which is just absurd. That's so much that's unneeded. Resources that could be diverted to something else, but yet we're just wasting them on these legal staffers. I would love to keep every one of them if we had the budget and like just had the like opportunity for them. But we don't, because the Justice Department has a small number of prosecutors and a large amount of legal staffers, which is just so unneeded.
Yeah, couldn't you just as easily argue that the large number of legal staffers is, I'm not going to say detrimental per se, but it's not necessarily a bad thing having large amounts of what are essentially paralegals. But firstly, couldn't you argue lots of the things they have been doing are in violation of the barcode? Because some of them have been filing cases on the board, for example. And filing cases is directly before the courts would indeed be something that's required an attorney to do, technically speaking, according to the barcode. But yeah.
To my knowledge, the only thing legal staffers are doing are filing the bill of information.
Yeah.
And I don't believe they're actually filing it with the district courts. I believe they're just doing the paperwork, awaiting the signature of the state attorney for the state attorney to file it. To my knowledge, that's how it's been, and I haven't really been told of any like cases where the legal staffer is filing. And if I was told, I would immediately take action, because that is indeed against the bar.
But wouldn't it perhaps be a bit more, a bit easier for people to tell you about these things if DOJ didn't have quite so extensive non-disclosure agreements, which the legality of which we'll not bother discussing as that's interesting. But they're pretty much all-inclusive non-disclosures right now, which pretty much it prevents any way for people to ensure things are going on fairly and just essentially without any form of corruption involved.
The non-disclosure agreement it's an old one that was remade a long time ago, to this point that I don't even remember which attorney general wrote it. And I rewrote it some time ago and bought it up as Adam. I can't remember if he liked the idea or disliked it. I believe we're still operating on the same agreement, which I tried to change again it's a repeating cycle of my opinion was bought and was considered, and I thank Adam for considering it, but it was just not what happened.
Oh, fair enough. What other jobs do you currently have within the state that you might have to give up due to taking on the position of Attorney General?
I recently resigned my position with the state police. I served as a trooper there, and I resigned for other reasons which I would not like to discuss. But in regards to other jobs I would need to resign, I would probably say the public broadcasting service. Maybe I could step down to serve as a part-time employee, but I'm not sure I could keep up with the requirements. Hell, right now I'm struggling as it is with real life obligations, the campaign, and just the broadcasting service. While I would love to stay there, and I would love to introduce the number of ideas I've fought forth. For example, I remade the newspaper there, the format, to make it more realistic, and I introduced that. I introduced the idea of op-eds and opinion editorials to bring that back from the typical news article that does not generate as much attention simply because everyone already has that information. By the time the broadcasting service publishes it, it's already an announcement. It's like 3 days old.
Yeah.
But that's another topic. I digress.
Well, getting back on topic, what do you think of the current relationship between the Attorney General's office and the District Attorney's office?
Well, I believe there's fault on both sides, and there is fault on my side, and I will take up responsibility for that. I believe that the language that the district attorney is using to accuse and verbally castrate the attorney general is a little inappropriate. However, I believe the actions from the attorney general was also a little bit inappropriate, and also the removal of permissions was done by myself, but that was done after a miscommunication between me and the attorney general regarding permissions and, making the district attorney's office a independent entity.
Yeah. Well, going back to a question from the stream chat, and regarding what you said about not having enough time for the public broadcasting service, couldn't you argue if you don't have enough time for the public broadcasting service, how on earth would you have enough time to be an advocate attorney general?
The reason I don't have time for the broadcasting service is because I'm delegating time to the campaign. The campaign isn't forever. Once the campaign's over, and if I do win, that time is delegated to the Department of Justice. And how would I say this? The position of the Attorney General, while I've been doing prosecution cases and criminal cases, which no other Deputy Attorney General or Attorney General to my knowledge has been doing, like regular cases, I just find a kick out of doing them. I do believe I would have the time to do it and the motivation to do it. And I don't want to say I have a lack of motivation for the public broadcasting service. That's not true. I just have more motivation to serve the Department of Justice because it's a leader's position where everyone looks to me, and if I fail, the department fails.
Yeah. Well, again, another question from the stream chat. Given you said the district attorney's language he's been using was inappropriate, couldn't you argue the exact same for some of the many things Adam has said in response to pretty much anything anyone ever says against him?
Oh, yeah. And that goes back to what I said about the recall. I don't believe he was recalled because of the actual allegations. I believe he's just recalled simply because of his demeanor to others. And I don't come with that demeanor. I'm a different person. I'm typically a chill person, unless it's campaigns. Then I come out fighting simply because I want to do what's best for the department. I have a plan. I know what I'm doing.
Couldn't you argue Adam's demeanor is reasonably sufficient reason to recall him? Because an attorney general should be able to work with people around him without essentially spewing insults at them whenever they do anything he doesn't appreciate.
Oh yeah, and I never said that it's not a recallable reason. I'm simply saying I don't believe he's recalled for the reasons listed on the petition. I think he's more recalled for his demeanor.
Fair enough. And back to generally your qualifications, you have a decent amount of political experience within Mayflower, and how do you think this will influence your time as Attorney General? And equally, how are you likely to run for anything else and hence not spend time appropriately towards the Attorney General's office?
I was recently offered the position to serve with Francis to run with him as the lieutenant governor. I turned down that position to serve with to focus on the campaign. And the Department of Justice is my focus. It's been my focus since late November when I was hired to serve as the Deputy Attorney General. It continues to be my focus. And I don't believe of any political offices that are left on my quote goal sheet.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, a point raised by, again, I'm pretty sure that's Brooklyn Prime, so a court clerk, is lots of the current attorneys within DOJ have been acting unprofessionally and in ways that pretty much mirror Adams, so sending insults towards fellow attorneys and clerks and so on. Do you think this is a problem currently, and if so, how do you intend to deal with it?
I've never heard of these allegations, but if they are brought forward, that makes me angry just to think about. For a state representative to just go off on another just legal representative solely because he's doing his job, that's entirely inappropriate, horrible, and that's just reprehensible. That's something that should not be seen in a state representative. You should probably, if you're wired like that to where you have to insult other people because you can't do your job properly, you should just not have that job. It sounds rough, but it's the truth. You should not have that job if you just cannot keep up with the qualifications or do not have the legal competence for it.
Well, shouldn't you argue, as currently Deputy Attorney General, these allegations should definitely have made their way to you before they've made their way to many other people in the state?
Yes, this is the first time hearing it, and I say this over and over. Any allegations regarding this should be sent to the Justice Management Division, but I believe that allegations that are of this scale should be sent to me, but I would not want to make it a confusing process where it's like, should I send this to the Justice Management Division or the Deputy Attorney General? My DMs are open for anything. If you want to just send it to me to check it out, I'll send it to the Management Division or myself directly. Either way, you can count on me to take care of the complaint you have. I'm not going to sit there and say, oh, I'm not going to take care of it because that's not my job. That's above my pay grade. Handle it with someone else. I'm the one that cares. I will indeed handle it. I'll send it myself to the Justice Management Division if I have to. It will be taken care of.
Why do you think currently these complaints have not made their way to you and instead made their way to members of the Senate, the State Bar Ethics Committee, and even the governor has received a variety of complaints regarding state attorneys?
Quite frankly, I don't know. I really don't know. And simply because the allegations don't reach me doesn't mean that I wouldn't act. It just means I just haven't been informed of them. And I would love to be informed on them, and I would love to take action right now. Like, my blood is actively boiling, and I would love to take action on any attorney that just stains the name of the Department of Justice so badly. It leaves a bad taste in my mouth just thinking about it.
I mean, couldn't you argue the attorneys are simply acting in a similar manner to the current Attorney General, and as such are acting by, he's not necessarily setting a good example?
Well, the Attorney General has also suffered his consequence of his actions, I believe. He's currently recalled, and any attorney that's acting that way should face consequences similar to that. Termination, suspension, it seems a little too light for me, but it could be doable depending on circumstance. Maybe a blacklist from the Department of Justice, maybe a blacklist from just state-funded jobs in general. I would take action, I promise.
Well, wouldn't you argue that, all prosecutors, as per the Constitution, should be bar certified and as such should be following the bar code? And as such, wouldn't something like, for example, the Attorney General saying, and I quote, whatever you put in the barcode doesn't and can't change what the department's prosecutors can and can't do.
That I side with Adam most of the time, but that's something I can't side with. The barcode is there for a reason. The attorneys are certified for a reason. And if this is similar to just hiring a prosecutor without a bar certification, you can't do that for reasons. They have to be trained in this kind of stuff. They have to know the rules and regulations set out by the state bar for these reasons. And I believe to say something like that is just wrong. I don't know.
Well, couldn't you argue that's just generally the sort of statements he's been making across the board to everyone, and yet you still seem to support him as Attorney General currently?
I support some of the actions he's done. I don't support the temperament or the demeanor has. Again, he's got some good ideas, and generally I think he's a good person, besides those few flaws, and those few flaws have costed him a job. And it's just something that you have to look back and say, maybe he bought it on himself. I think he kind of did, but I digress.
Oh, for another question from the stream chat, Theof Nova is asking, well, aren't you currently doing this Attorney General's job now? Because apparently he sees you doing a lot more work than he sees him doing.
My office has issued more memorandums regarding like structure changes, ethics. Hell, I wrote the ethics code for the Department of Justice, a new one, because I did not like the old one written by Adam. Let's see, what other changes did I do? I made a memo recently to completely recall a number of memos issued from like old attorney generals that are still technically in effect and enforceable, that were just simply no longer like useful. For example, there's a memorandum under Walter that was regarding the public defender's office and actions of that office and how to treat them and stuff like that, that, you know, obviously should not be on the books as enforceable, because for obvious reasons, the public defender's office is no longer with us. So I've done structure changes, administrative changes, ethics changes, how things are handled, and I would love to keep doing changes. My job is amazing, and I would love to keep working for the Justice Department. But as I've said before, there have been some issues where Adam and I disagree on how to handle it, and where, again, my opinion is considered, but it's just not what's taken. And I believe that my opinions are, I don't want to say better, but would get the best result than what was actually taken at the time.
That is generally the whole point of having your own opinion.
Yes.
Moving on, what do you think of the jurisdiction the Department of Justice currently has that was taken over from the Department of Public Safety? And what do you think of the fact the Senate recently voted to remove a power that the Attorney General used to have to unilaterally suspend any department for literally any reason he liked?
I believe that the removal was because of Adam, and I don't think that the Department of Justice itself should have been punished for the actions of Adam Stratton. I think if the Senate was uncomfortable with those jobs or uncomfortable with what they did or what Adam did, that they should have either revised it or contacted us to talk about it, or just waited for after these elections to see, should we keep these, because the next Attorney General could actually use them properly.
Well, couldn't you just as easily argue that the current law was pretty flawed, relatively speaking, if it allows an Attorney General to order any department to do literally anything he likes, with no oversight, other than impeachment of recalls, obviously, with no oversight, no restrictions, no warning, and having no middle ground between doing nothing and suspending the entire department?
I was actually the writer of that bill.
I'm aware. I'm slightly judging you, but yeah.
Thank you. And this was, when I wrote the bill, it was based on the ideals that we would have an Attorney General that knew how to handle the powers, knew what to do, when to use them. And it was, if the elections made by the public referendum wanted someone, then and that was their leadership style. That's probably what was wanted. If not, the recall is there for a reason, as well as impeachment. And as shown, the people didn't really vote him in, but they didn't like what he was doing, so they took him out.
Well, yeah.
And while true, it was a little flawed and should have been revised rather than just completely removed, or at least contacting us and saying, can you guys change how you do this and this, rather than just no contact, striking it from the books. That's a topic for another day.
I do think it is worth noting the Senate had multiple talks with the current Attorney General about it, and after some very interesting responses, that some of which I don't think I could even repeat on this stream, we decided to remove it anyway, because it was the most efficient way of doing it when the Attorney General had no interest in communicating a new way of doing it or any revisions to the existing legislation.
I believe, as I said before, that it's a punishment on the Department of Justice to remove the powers from the Office of the Attorney General rather than Attorney General Adam Stratton himself. I think it should have been maybe kept or revised or changed for the Department of Justice, and if the Senate did not like it, impeach Adam rather than simply just removing the power overall for administrations to come to no longer be able to use that power.
Well, it's not a power that has any practical purpose. What benefit would there ever be for suspending an entire department rather than doing something smaller? What's the situation where you want to suspend an entire department?
It's based on circumstance. I served as the Secretary of Department of the Secretary of Public Safety, and I used censures quite a bit, more than I really should have, and I'll be the first one to say that. But it's a power that, while not used a lot, it should be there as an option.
Well, the legislation that you wrote yourself doesn't allow for censures or anything of the sort. All it allows is for orders, which, if not followed, result in the entire department being suspended. There is no middle ground. There is no anything else it can order. It is simply either do it or your entire department gets suspended.
And this was written in the belief that the Attorney General would reasonably use these orders.
There's no way to reasonably use those orders, though. All you're doing is saying, do this, or else I basically delete everything you care about. There is no middle ground saying, oh, if you don't do this, we will just do it for you. We'll take over your department. No, instead, it just says the entire department just goes. Isn't that no different to just blackmailing or saying, do this or you're fired, do this or you're fired?
Well, it was written based on what the Department of Public Safety had, and that's just been how it's been in Mayflower since that bill was written by Harry, I think.
Harry definitely didn't write that. It was too long after that. Although, admittedly, I don't know who did write it.
I don't remember. But, again, it's been what it's been in Mayflower since that time, and it was based off that. If it wanted to be changed, sure, change it. That's fine too. The Senate is there to continuously revise and make new laws depending on the public's need.
The Department of Public Safety Group still exists.
Yeah, it does. I found that funny. So does the Discord, and I also find that weird.
I mean, we might bring it back one day. I mean, the governor thought that by repealing the act to repeal the Department of Public Safety Act, we would be bringing back the Department of Public Safety, which is not how it works, but you can understand why someone might think that.
Yeah, it's understandable. Yeah. The order is still in place that requires it to be dead.
Well, it's not even, because technically that's the bit of the law that requires it to be dead is indeed not actually in effect. But there's also no law in effect that gives them any power in the first place. So that's like saying like saying because there's no law that says I can't be the Timport Overlord of everyone, I can just be the Timport Overlord of everyone. Unfortunately, that's not how it works.
Yeah, that's also true. And let's see. The Department of Public Safety has had that power. If the Senate's is a thing to revise, make laws, and to change things based on the public's need, if the public or the senators themselves thought it needed to be changed, change it. That's fine. That's what you're elected to do. It's your job, and I will not complain.
Well, I hope in the future we can have constructive discussions regarding changing of laws rather than very loud arguments followed by the law being entirely repealed.
And if I were elected Attorney General, I promise to have constructive criticism and to have conversations rather than what you're saying of just arguments with no results. I haven't really seen these arguments, but I'm just, for argument's sake, going off what you say.
Well, on the off chance Adam continues to run, I would rather not say anything else too directly against him. But, well, he is technically running anyway because he can't drop out because it's a recall election against him. But
yeah.
So, are you saying, based on what you said earlier, that Adam's got no intention of winning this election?
Around halfway through the actual recall petition, getting like half its votes, we decided, yeah, this is a race that's too far to win. Might as well put the resources in me. If he could win by some God knows chance, and that would be fun. But the probability of that is really, really, really low.
Yeah.
To the point that it's better to allocate resources to my campaign.
Yeah, I would probably agree that the chances don't look great based on the original recall petition.
A little off topic, but I believe the requirements for recall are a little too high. 350 seems just
that's
a
not 350, it's 300, but it's got 350. Yeah, but I would agree. It's also not necessarily a very fair system when currently there's, I think the SC, they didn't actually rule on it, but they essentially said that every single recall has to be accepted no matter what it says. And that's a very interesting thing to say, because there's nothing stopping me from saying, if you became Attorney General, recalling you for having that hat. I could do that, and the Lieutenant Governor, per what the Supreme Court said, would have to accept that as a valid recall reason, which is interesting.
A lot of the things in the Constitution are based on hopefully having competent people in office.
Yeah, which is not really something we can rely on these days, but you know.
Yes, and that's why I'm running, so hopefully win the vote. And I think recall petitions should be like 200, because normal election term now is like around 200, which is reasonably enough.
It varies, but yeah. I got 69 votes in the last Senate election? So. Another good point that's worth pointing out is someone saying how, as the Attorney General's position is linked to the governor's one election-wise, that wouldn't there be another election a few weeks later? But no, Carlos already said he's not bothering with the second election that will be about a week from now.
Never mind, I just had the mute button
on. How did you manage that? How did you manage that?
My mute button is the middle mouse key, and I just held it while trying to move my mouse and did not notice. Can you repeat the question?
So given, it was a question I was answering. I was just saying that even though there is technically meant to be another Attorney General election, I think 3 weeks from now, 2 weeks from now, Carl's obviously not bothering with that because it would be a bit pointless.
And reasonably so.
Yeah.
That should really be included in the Constitution.
But it's not an eventuality that why would you recall someone about 2 weeks before they would have got rid of anyway? Why would you do that?
Well, true, but I believe there's probably some circumstances where it's like, you know what, it may be 3 weeks from now.
Yeah.
This is just too bad of an action to let go.
To be fair, this is one of the reasons it's sometimes decent to have people who can go, you know what, no, we're not doing that. So long as they only do that in sensible circumstances. I'm definitely not advocating for sometimes that's been said in the past. But, I didn't eliminate Adam from running. He's automatically put in this election. He doesn't even have to apply for this election. He gets automatically put into it.
Yeah. I think Adam was freaking out because Carl was joking around and said disqualified to him, and I think he was just.
I mean, it would be interesting if Carl did disqualify someone like that, wouldn't it? Because I mean, he could if the person did something, but wouldn't that be unconstitutional, basically? because they have to be allowed to run in the election.
Something. That is something, yeah, that is considerable.
Yeah, it's interesting. Although,
I've been really
I don't know. Interesting hypothetical. Hopefully it will never happen. Or equally, hopefully it will happen, because that'd be fun to watch. But so far the only person to have been disqualified is Brooklyn from the county board election, and Sam then dropped out of the AG election.
Does it say that Eagle is disqualified for you? Because it says so for me.
It does, but it was never announced, and I think that was Carl acting on his joke of saying Eagle's getting automatically disqualified for everything. I presume. Okay. I'm not entirely sure. Anyway, back from another question. What do you think about the alleged constitutionality of the National Guard's actions? It's worth pointing out the Attorney General cannot technically say if something's constitutional or not, but he is allowed to have an opinion on it. So what's your opinion on it?
Regarding what?
Just apparently just in general, but if the person wants to elaborate on their question, they are more than welcome to. I don't know if they will or not.
I'm gonna assume it's regarding reforms.
I would presume so.
The reforms are completely legal and constitutional. I don't know of any reason they wouldn't be.
Yeah.
The Public Servants Act
allows for recalls.
Does define.
Sorry, reforms.
Yeah.
There's nothing particularly in the Constitution about anything like that. Oh, the Fluffy Goose case is currently protected by many things we can't. Oh, that's a good one. That's not true, sort of. The Constitution does allow for military police, sort of, but that's only because military police are technically treated as law enforcement officers by the... Which act is it? Military Police Act? No, Union National Guard Act. Yeah. Okay, so what do you think about military police being able to arrest civilians? That's a good one.
There are some situations where military policemen need to arrest civilians. I served as the colonel for military police, which is the commanding officer of the military police overall, and part of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And yeah, there are situations where military police need to arrest civilians. For example, when a civilian is trespassing on the military exclusion zone.
The original legislation required that a civilian law enforcement officer had to come along and arrest them for that, which I personally preferred because it allowed. Because currently, if you want to challenge an arrest by a military police officer, that has to be challenged in the military courts. Whereas for any other arrest, it would be challenged in the civilian courts. So in order for it to be consistent, it would make more sense to either make it so it can be challenged in the civilian courts, which no previous Major General has ever liked the idea of at all, or make it so they outright can't arrest them and a proper law enforcement officer has to.
Well, no. I do agree that a civilian law enforcement officer, if present, should do the arrest. But if not, they have to have those powers allocated to them for those situations. And it should really be more of a policy of don't arrest unless there's a civilian officer online rather than like law.
Yeah.
Because it just leaves a taste in my mouth where it shouldn't really be law, it should just be policy.
In real life, it's always good not to have laws that pedantically state every little thing. But in the case of Mayflower, it's been proven in the past that quite often we need those pedantic little things to stop people abusing stuff.
And once again, that's based on the ideals that the commanding officers are competent people that know how to use their powers. Yeah. As you said, that's hard to come by in Mayflower. Yeah. But there's just some situations we need to tweak. And yeah, I guess you could argue that we need that clause specifically in the legislation so that some rogue colonel does not come about and remove that policy simply because he just wants to, and that it's kept there because it's lawfully required. Yeah. But I just don't like the idea of it being lawfully required. But, there's just some things we have to protect, and it's reasonable.
Well, going back to laws in general, what do you think about the current Public Servants Act? As lots of people do complain about it, but equally lots of their complaints wouldn't necessarily be fixed by their proposed solutions.
When I first joined Mayflower, I tried to get as much jobs as I could. I tried to do as much as I could. I had a lot of jobs at one point. I believe I was the colonel, state police something. maybe Department of Justice at one point, and I just had a lot of stuff going on. I was advising for a lot of stuff for the Joint Chiefs of Staff and stuff, and I believe that at that time I could have probably handled more jobs, but also there's some people that just want more jobs that don't have any, and sure there should be a limit. I think it could be raised just a tiny bit, solely because Mayflower is experiencing a lack of competency and qualified workers that are working in other jobs that we should probably delegate to more.
Yeah.
Because they have the competency for it.
Well, you can't really win either way, because you either have people who end up inactive due to having too many jobs, or you end up with departments being inactive because they've got no staff. There's a fine line to try and balance it.
And I believe we could maybe raise that limit to get that balance. I believe I could probably find a few people that are similar to me, could like hold more jobs than is legally like allocated. And I think we could raise it up a little, but that's just my opinion.
Another question from the stream audience, from Loading Your Name. What do you think of law enforcement officers allegedly being able to murder somebody trying to steal their vehicle? However, civilians cannot do this.
Law enforcement trying to take a law enforcement vehicle, or
I believe that's the implication from the question.
If it's done that put in a way that puts like a passenger in danger, like if I'm on a ride along and I get out of the car and someone sneaks behind me and takes it off of my car, my ride along is now at risk for anything. The perpetrator could have a knife, a gun, anything that could.
I do believe most policy is based on you cannot use lethal force when someone steals your car unless there's someone in the car for whatever reason. But equally, I do know for a fact that's often not been the case. And I also know for a fact DOJ has specifically not been prosecuting these cases. Although, obviously, I can't say how I know that, because you have some very extensive NDAs that people would have been violating.
Yeah.
Although, equally, the Whistleblower Act trumps that, but equally it doesn't, because our laws are stupid. But whatever.
An argument for another day. But I believe that, similar to the Tennessee versus Garner ruling by the Supreme Court, that if you have probable cause that your ride along or a person is in danger besides, they have the car, while you could argue that having the car is dangerous, that's probably something for the Supreme Court to decide. In my opinion, I would say, no, that's not enough to warrant lethal force. But if the person's has a firearm and has previously or was being chased for previously,
then clearly lethal force is obviously already acceptable in that situation. It's all based on the situation, really.
Everything is based on the situation, especially regarding lethal force and use of force for law enforcement.
That's one of the reasons it's probably for the best that DOJ do quite extensively filter for their tips and what they prosecute and what they don't. But equally, couldn't you argue that same filtering can lead to some very hard to detect corruption, especially when you consider all the NDAs?
The NDAs is going to be changed almost instantly as soon as I get into office. There's some things that I just want to change right now that I probably can't. But, that's why I'm running. That's why I'm here tonight, to run. And regarding case filtering, the current system is just if the for the criminal division, if the assistant attorney general looks at it and says, yes, this looks like a prosecutable case, and assigns it, I don't like the idea of having one person say, yeah, that's prosecutable. I don't know if that's a word, but I'm using it. And so I don't like the idea of just one person saying that. Similar to the idea when I was the public safety secretary, that I didn't like when internal affairs had oversight positions where one person could look at a case and say, I don't want that case, strike it down immediately. I didn't like that. That's too much power for one person. And as we said previously in the interview, This is done in good faith, hoping that we would have someone competent in the position, but Mayflower is just suffering that lack of
Yeah.
competency.
Well, to ask a variant one of the questions in the chat, what do you think about the current disparity we have in the state between what someone can be arrested for and what someone can be convicted for? Because realistically, that's always going to happen when we do essentially skip the courts when arresting people. But shouldn't it be, given the records you get are essentially the same, shouldn't officers have a higher threshold of evidence and a higher threshold of proof when arresting people?
Of course, I'm all up for proof is very required when doing arrests, and I believe you were the one that said this, that there was a previous Supreme Court ruling that ruled that arrests were
they're essentially treated as convictions. Yeah, I
believe the
can't. That
ruling
was a long time ago, though.
Yeah, it was a really long ruling, and they should be treated as convictions. Maybe.
Well, I think generally we treat them as convictions after a false arrest case has failed. Generally,
yeah,
it varies. I know, for example, lots of departments will let people in if they have arrests, but not let them in if they've got convictions. Which is not necessarily a good thing when we're meant to treat them the same, but it's a practical thing due to how sometimes it takes a long time to get a record removed, especially even if it's false. Especially when DOJ sometimes decide to contest expungements and sometimes don't.
Well, the contestant expungements should really be done by the district attorney's office.
Well, equally, don't forget with the really interesting system we've got right now. If you want to call a record false, you don't do it as an expungement; you do it as a civil case. Only sometimes the Solicitor General's office decides to back up the officer, and then sometimes they just outright don't. Hell, sometimes the Solicitor General's office will outright back the other party, which is very interesting.
Yeah, that rule was recently amended to where the Solicitor General's office has no say whatsoever regarding the protection of government officials. And I would say that if we were to bring it back, maybe not under the Solicitor General's office, maybe under a more unified office that's not delegated so many tasks regarding like Supreme Court petitions, general like reviewing law stuff to make sure it's constitutional, and stuff like that. In regards to like convictions and arrests, an idea that could be brought that says an arrest is treated as a conviction after a set amount of time, where it's like maybe like 30 days.
Yeah, enough time for people who've had the opportunity to try and contest it.
Yes, something to where it's like you've had the opportunity. At this point, you've basically admitted guilt to it by not contesting it.
Yeah.
That's a little far.
Well, equally, currently the courts don't allow people to expunge stuff if they're tourists. And ICF don't let people become citizens if they've got records. So how does that work? But that's just one of the interesting complexities of our state.
That's something above my pay grade, but in my opinion, I think ICF should not base on records.
Well, I think ICF should purely based on, are they in all? Yes. Okay, yes. Get lost.
Yeah, that's right. But I don't know. I have no idea about ICF. I never served in ICF.
Fair enough. Nor have I officially. Although that doesn't stop many people messaging me asking for citizenship.
Oh yeah, I get messages.
I am sure at least one person would have asked it in the stream chat. At least one.
I don't doubt it.
Another question from Loading Your Name is whether you actually start, whether you plan on getting DOJ to start prosecuting cases of excessive lethal force by law enforcement officers.
Oh yeah, we have a division dedicated to that, the Ethics and Compliance Office. I would like to change the name to something else, like the Civil Division, but...
couldn't you argue, given a vast majority of cases can currently be won simply by saying DOJ maliciously prosecuting me? Because here are 10 examples where the same thing happened and they didn't prosecute. And that can make you win literally every single time these days. And shouldn't that not necessarily be the case?
The Department of Justice has been under so many leaderships where it's hard to find precedent, because there's been attorney generals have different mindsets, different ideologies, and it's hard to pick something from like an old attorney general and say, yeah, blame the Department of Justice because they did not prosecute for this. When, in my opinion, some of these cases, if I look at them today, and I would have said, wow, that's really bad. I need to prosecute for this. But obviously, I was not in charge at the time. Now, yeah, again, based on the ideals that there's competent people in office that should know when to prosecute and when not to. It all leads back to the same issue. But I don't like the idea of pulling out precedent from old attorney generals that just, it doesn't represent the Department of Justice.
Maybe you should join one of your prosecutors next time someone argues that and just repeat what you just said and see how it goes.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure the questions are starting to dry up. So, unless you have anything else you particularly want to say, I think we are done.
I hope that anyone watching this stream took into account what I said.
Oh God, what is trip?
And agrees with most of the stuff I said. If not, that's fine. You have your own opinion. I'm not going to bother. But sincerely, I'm out here for your vote. I'm out here fighting for you. I've been fighting for you. Please let me continue the fight. And I've been doing the administrative work for some time now. But that all depends on your voice. Your voice on January, what is the date? 26th. I encourage you to vote. Even if it's not for me, please vote. Just vote, even if it's not for me. Your voice does matter. I mean, hell, your voice got someone out of office. It does matter.
True. Well, one final question from the people on the stream, from one Tripped Over, who I get the feeling may or may not be Trip Nixon. Awesome, will you marry him?
Yes, I will, please.
Oh snap, I'm so jealous. Shit, Trip. Trip, you traitor. Anyway, that's everything covered, so... Oh well. Anyway, that's everything covered. There will be another one of these streams tomorrow, along with potentially an Attorney General debate. There has been some discussion on whether it will be a voice debate or a typed debate. So that could be interesting because everyone's shouting over each other. It's going to be amazing.
I would love that.
I would love it, but it's not fair on anyone who doesn't want to talk. It's the issue. So we're just going to have to wait and see how it goes and see who wants to do it. Anyway, so that's everything covered. Thank you all for watching. Thank you, Awesome, for showing up to this interview, and good night.